And welcome to episode 5 of the Nerdkast. Today we'll be talking about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. In case you're wondering, we are laughing because Bo is the master of sound effects. So, joining me...
It's okay, keep it in. Don't edit this out.
Oh no, this is all going in. Unfiltered. Joining us tonight is... making his triumphant return is Bo. Welcome, Bo. And Austin, welcome back.
Hey, how's it
and
going?
Henry, welcome back, Henry. So we did, I think about 2 weeks ago, we talked about episode 1. So we're going into the second one, obviously. I wanted to start off with a question that is pretty much pure fan speculation. Besides, I want to say like maybe, I'm not sure if there's a novel that happens in between this time period. But there is like an Obi-Wan and Anakin, like a 5-issue comic run. But I wanted to ask, and I'll start with Bo for this, speculate on what you think happened during the 10 years between episode 1 and episode 2.
Ooh, well, definitely the first two people I think about is Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Mm-hmm.
I would just really like to see how Obi-Wan like prepares himself mentally to start this plan for Anakin. Like, did he have like a plan, or did he go over? Does anybody just know like his development plan, or is it just kind of, was he going as he went? So I'm just curious. I'd like to see that that process of what he went through to, what he had for Anakin.
It does beg the question. I mean, I have to assume to some extent Anakin would have gone through the same process as a lot of the other younglings and stuff, but he was already like 9 or 10 when he started his training. So
yeah,
what point in the train, like, did he start from ground zero and work his way up, or what? I don't know. What about you, Austin? What do you think, man?
I think Anakin had a lot of wet dreams about Padme.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
But other than that, I actually did have a book that kind of detailed a certain mission that Obi-Wan and Anakin were on, and then corresponding to that was when Dooku was actually, I think he was a Padawan learner at the time, and it like documents like some time between like his training and like a fellow friend of his that I think they eventually turn on each other, which happens like sometime in between episodes 1 and 2. I can't really say like, well, I think they did this, I think they did that. I just feel like there's a lot of character development that has yet to be seen from both characters, if we're talking specifically Obi-Wan and Anakin. It's kind of the same way in the gap between episodes 3 and 4, where we got with Rogue One and Solo. There's just like a lot of material that hasn't been documented, or unless it's been erased by Disney, who knows at this point.
Yeah, I mean, with the Disney takeover, obviously they turned everything that was existing prior to, like, that wasn't a movie or the Clone Wars TV shows. They pretty much were just like, okay, that's all expanded universe, and then we're going to start clean, and from here on out we'll go canon. So Henry, I wonder, like, Dooku says something at one point where he says like, it's a shame our paths had never crossed before, to Obi-Wan. That makes me kind of think that he wasn't even around prior to Obi-Wan becoming Qui-Gon's apprentice. So I wonder, what are your thoughts on, like, Palpatine goes from being a newly elected chancellor, and the occupation of Naboo ends kind of not according to his plan. And then we pick up at, Attack of the Clones. And obviously there have been these machinations, like, the clone army the order for that being put in and all that kind of stuff. What are just your overall thoughts and speculations on what may have occurred between those two episodes?
Well, from Chancellor Palpatine and Dooku, I definitely think, like, even Dooku going past his training, even before the episodes of episode 1, like, I think at the very beginning of Attack of the Clones, Ki-Adi-Mundi says that Dooku is a political idealist. So I'm sure that he definitely had a lot of, I guess he was kind of like a real life or sci-fi like Ben Shapiro, or even like Trevor Noah, maybe, like someone who just commentates on politics, whether it's comical or more serious or whatever it was. So he'd be like one of those kind of guys. But as for Palpatine, I think one of the bigger issues that he faces, like, okay, so here I am in the Chancellor's seat. I'm the most powerful man in the entire galaxy. Now, how do I retain that power? And because he fully didn't have all the power to do whatever he wanted yet, so he started devising a way to make that happen. And I think that's what led him to Dooku and him kind of playing on what Dooku wanted, because he can only have one apprentice at one time. So Darth Maul dies at the end of episode 1. So somewhere between episode 1 and episode 2, he had to not only recruit Count Dooku, but also turn him Darth and basically have him on board for, hey, we're going to have the first war since the formation of the Republic, and it's going to cover the entire galaxy. But it's because of that war that he got emergency powers that now have an army at his disposal, which eventually would take out the Jedi, but also would give him the emergency powers that he needed to stay in office longer.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, I think of all the different times we see Sidious specifically, but I would assume all Sith in general, it's like they're constantly testing their apprentices in the most like brutal and harsh ways possible, while at the same time kind of grooming the next one and the next one. And it really begs a question, like, where did Darth Sidious really make himself known to Count Dooku? And when specifically in the timeline did he really like start his process of changing to the dark side? Because you're right. I mean, Ki-Adi Mundi says, "Oh, he's a political idealist," and Mace Windu's like, "There's no way he could try and kill somebody. He's still or he was a Jedi and all that." But I wonder quite. I wonder at what point that conversation was had, similar to when Sidious makes himself known to Anakin that he is in fact, not just Chancellor Palpatine, he's also Sith Lord. It's an interesting question that I think would be very interesting to explore in like a book or something else. And maybe it already has been. If you know of that, please let us know in the comments. But moving right along, this is probably the least favorite of my questions, because as we've kind of touched on before, my least favorite aspect of this film is the execution of, Padme and Anakin's relationship, and how, in my opinion, it's not too weird, because I would assume they're probably like a 7-year difference in their ages and stuff. So she's probably about like 26, 27, and Anakin's in like the 19 to 20 range.
They're actually 4 years apart, because she's 14 in episode 1 when she's already queen. She's the youngest queen, or she says she's not the youngest queen, but she was elected at age 14 and Anakin was 10.
So canonically, there's only 4 years separation?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not quite as bad as I thought. And even 7 years, I mean, I guess by today's standards, that's not like the weirdest thing. It's kind of a Demi Moore, Ashton Kutcher thing. But Austin, discuss the development of Anakin and Padme's relationship in this film. And do you feel it was done effectively?
Well, I sometimes try and give it a pass when I'm watching the movie, where I know the story. Master of sound effects.
I was trying to. Sorry.
You're good.
I know John Williams was in here. We got him in the other room tied up.
The big ass John Williams. God damn.
Oh, where was I? So when I'm watching this movie, I sometimes give that story a pass, where I know where the story is going with this, and I know what it's trying to accomplish. However, was it executed as best as it could have been? Absolutely not. When you go back and watch those scenes specifically between Anakin and Padme, it does come off as a little creeper material. It comes off as a little bit of a stalker obsession sort of deal, I think, especially from Anakin's perspective. I know there's a question specifically about his portrayal as Anakin Skywalker later, so I'll save that for then. Mm-hmm. However, I think it is forced. I think when you go and look at them, it's scene by scene, it's kind of like, how do we end up where we are by the end of episode 2 and then in episode 3, if we're just talking about the movies?
Yeah.
It's hard to buy into it, the fact that like Padme would be interested in a guy who is, killing the Tusken Raiders and, just kind of whining all the time about how, the Jedi are treating him unfairly and how they never listen to him. I don't know, Anakin is kind of a brat in episode 2.
Mm-hmm.
And unless, forgive me for not remembering the medical terminology for it, but unless Padme has this complex about wanting to take care of someone in a position like Anakin, then it's why would you ever find any interest in this guy?
Yeah,
I call that dog lovers.
He's got a very intense personality in this, and I don't know if that's mixture of what I remember it being a 19-year-old boy and stuff like that, or 20-year-old, whatever he's supposed to be, but mixed with intense Jedi training and just the sheer amount of responsibility that he's probably aspiring to. And I mean, I have a hard time believing that he didn't hear that he's allegedly the chosen one at some point or another. So there's a lot, I'm sure, riding on him. And
right, and
he gets separated from his mother, who he was attached to. Qui-Gon dies, who he was attached to, and then by the time we're getting into this, he's already having nightmares about his mom getting killed. So
right, and to go back to my original point, where it's when I'm watching this movie and I'm seeing the story unfold, I understand we have to give Anakin a stressful background and make his development troubled throughout these movies. So as a story perspective, I can appreciate it and understand where it's coming from. I just don't think the execution was really there when it could have been.
I tend to agree with that. Henry, what are your thoughts on their relationship?
So in the last video we did about Harry Potter, I can't remember who it was who said it, about it would be fun to have videos where we actually disagree and civilly go about it. And I'm going to have to apologize right now because, most who know me know that I am diehard prequel defender. And so whereas I'm just saying this now, I respect your guys' opinion. I think it's completely wrong only because the execution of how they did Anakin, I've dissected it so many times, and I've also listened to Dave Filoni talk about it and George Lucas talk about it. And specifically, when it comes to the scenes between him and Natalie Portman, and this is how I've always taken it from what I've heard George Lucas talk about it. She was 14 years old when she was Queen of Naboo. A lot of people just saw her kind of as a political piece of meat. She was under so much pressure to lead this world, and the Trade Federation took over. And then Anakin, being this young, hopeful boy, somebody that she wasn't used to being around with that kind of optimism, saw her for something that nobody else on her planet did, which was just being a good person, just being this beautiful spirit, but also, yeah, but also something that I had realized is that these memories, specifically the ones on Naboo with him and her, those are the only happy memories that Anakin Skywalker has in his entire life. Those are the only moments, is when he's on. And as much as as the decades have rolled on and I've heard more and more people complain about those scenes specifically, what frustrates me is that when the scene specifically, when we're talking about when he says, they're talking about the Senate and the Republic, and that we should come together and find what's in the best interest of all the people and just do it. And she responds with, well, people don't always agree. And he's like, well, they should be made to by somebody wise. And what's crazy about that, especially in the rewatch, is that that is a dark foreshadowing of all the events to come all the way through the end of Return of the Jedi. So the thing that I love about George Lucas and his storytelling is that all the lines, regardless of how they were delivered, they all mean something. It's like watching Breaking Bad, where it's oh, you missed this thing over here, you missed this thing over here, because the creators of it are so intelligent and want every piece to be a puzzle that you can just put together. Also, something else that I picked up on my rewatch was that with Hayden specifically, just putting himself and this is more the character of Anakin, putting himself in the position of living his life as a slave, and then the one person, there's only two people really that he latched on to, which was Qui-Gon, who was killed right as soon as he met him, and then Padme, who had to stay on Naboo. 10 years go by where, as we see consistently throughout this movie, Obi-Wan belittling him little by little by little, which I also think goes into the line of "I failed you, Anakin, I failed you." He is always putting him down. He's always saying, "My young Padawan, you're too young, you're not good enough." And then that's why he always has those little rants of him saying, "Oh, it's Obi-Wan's fault. It's Obi-Wan's fault. He's holding me back. He's belittling me. He's beating the living hell out of me every step of the way." And then we finally get to him seeing Padme again, and he's like, aside from Qui-Gon, you're the only person I've ever actually like latched onto, other than his mother, of course, but she's still in Tatooine. And then going up to those scenes where he finally loses his mother, which he also correlated with being Obi-Wan's fault because he wasn't allowing him to progress, and he didn't even allow him to go save his mother. Like, he was just like, "Oh, well, we have to be mindful of the living force." So with every scene that he would freak out or break down, I think what was at stake was that this was his only answer for true happiness. And that's why I think Hayden Christensen played it so well, is that this meant everything to him. This was his only piece of true happiness. And as the franchise expands, really, he was only ever happy on those scenes on Naboo. Everything else, he was either a slave at war or Darth Vader ruling the Empire. And I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a thing, but
no, I really appreciate the alternative perspective. I think it's important in these conversations to look at it from everybody's point of view. From a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view.
You
told me he died.
What do you think, Bo? Any opinions on their relationship?
I enjoyed it. The part that just gets me is this is probably like one of my least favorite aspects is how they got into that room with the fireplace. Like, you go from I don't know. I want to know what led up to got them in that situation. Like, oh well, here's a nice dark room with fire. Let's sit here.
Yeah, like that wasn't a thirst trap at all.
Yeah, and he fucking just like, "Oh God, I love you." Like, he just starts pouring everything out. I'm like, God damn, what did I miss? Like, I just want to know what kind of led up to that. That's the part that kind of got me, where it just felt really rushed. Like, you got said kind of there. It just, but like I said, man, that movie was 2 hours and 30 minutes. I mean, that's a lot to pack in there. So it's so much going on, and I understand, I get it, and yeah. So.
Yeah, I fall in that category of it's like it's an important relationship, and I totally understand almost all the choices that he made, and I don't like. I try to have like suggestions or potential solutions for things that I take issue with, and I don't necessarily know how I would have done it differently per se.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still just, I don't know. It just feels very like
it was out of place for me. That scene.
It just feels cumbersome and like kind of like. And I don't even take too much issue like once they leave Naboo. It's really just kind of this like they leave Coruscant because she's being hunted by Boba Fett or some bounty hunter they don't even know at that point, and they go to Naboo, and it's just kind of like it seems, and it's probably to your point again, the whole like 2 to 2.5 hour movie mandate. It's just I don't know if it's that we didn't get enough, because what we got I was kind of bored with, but I don't know. It's just. It's one of those things that, like, again, I understand why it's so important, and it, like, I don't know. It's something about the execution. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it just,
yeah.
I didn't really buy into it. So, like, by the time where they're, like, being escorted out into, like, the sacrifice pit on Geonosis, that, like, and they're like, "I love you so much," and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, "I thought you didn't love me." And just, what? And I guess.
It kind of.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Spencer. I was just going to relate it back to the Harry Potter conversation we had, the first one we had, where the reason I had a problem with the Half-Blood Prince is because I thought, like, the acting, especially when it's just dialogue after dialogue after dialogue, was just stale and dull. And I think that's, like, the majority of the scenes we get that is just Anakin and Padme. It's just reading lines to each other to progress the story and progress, like, their subplot, their romantic subplot.
Well, what I will say also is, and once again, like, this just comes from years and years and years of dissecting specifically the prequels, because I do think, like, in terms of the 3 trilogies, this has always been my favorite, probably for nostalgic reasons, because I was a kid growing up when these movies came. I think we all were, unless anyone's older than 35.
What if you're right at 35?
Yeah. But yeah, so like I think like the first thing is that obviously like symbolism aside, which is like I don't know if any of you have seen the deleted scenes from episode 3 where Padme and Bail Organa are actually the beginning of the Rebel Alliance, and at one point they're sitting across from Palpatine and Anakin, like basically being like, "Hey, can we end this war? And can you get the heck out of the Chancellor's seat?" And he's just like, "What?" And Anakin's like latching onto his lightsaber right behind him, being like, "Yeah, this is not how this is going to go down." So you have this couple that literally one of them births the Empire and the other one births the Rebel Alliance, which I think that's something that like George sees, and it's not something that comes to our minds immediately when we first see these characters. But also in terms of relationship building, like the only other relationship we've ever seen in Star Wars was Han and Leia, and of course, like I just rewatched the original trilogy as well. And what I didn't realize, like as much back then, is like I remember them bickering at each other, but I thought there were more scenes of them actually like being in love. But it's like all of A New Hope, they yelled at each other. All of Empire Strikes Back, they yelled at each other. And then finally in Return of the Jedi, like you see them being like, you know, I love you. Like even the one scene with Luke and Han comes over, he gets a little jealous. He's like, "What? Is that Luke? Is that who you could tell?" And he was just like, no, come here. With Anakin and Padme, is like this is only the second time we've ever seen a romantic couple together, and I think one of the disconnects is like you can't really get all the knowledge of and all the emotions of what they had been feeling in the story that was kind of in George's head, and I think this is where the disconnect comes from. Is like it's not just a movie, like it's you have to do your research like before the movie kind of, which is very annoying at times. And I can definitely agree to that. Cause it's like watching The Mandalorian. Like you kind of have to watch Rebels and Clone Wars to really know who like Bo-Katan is. You also have to watch the original trilogy to know who Luke Skywalker is. And with this movie, I feel like there's just a lot of unconfirmed canons and like rumors and lore that George Lucas had before going into these characters in this movie. So, I mean, like you said in the first question, there's 10 years of misinformation that we just didn't get. But I think, though, the trials that they had gone through in those 10 years, including Padme getting killed and Anakin getting belittled by Obi-Wan, it's just they latched on to the idea of each other. Like, this other person saw me for who I truly wanted to be seen as.
Yeah, and I have to push back a little bit when I say that, you know, in any movie, it's the movie's job to give you all the information to some extent or another. Like it's fun to go beyond and try and like figure out all the minutia of it and everything. But at least in my opinion, I think a film should be able to, like an example I bring up is like with the Rise of Skywalker, and somebody's like, "Did you know that like all the like population of Exegol was, you know, bred and like changed and kind of brainwashed to be like Sith followers and worshippers and stuff?" And it's like, no. How would we know that?
Not at all.
How would we know that?
Am I supposed to where all those shits go?
So I totally understand what you're saying, and I think they're all good points. I think to kind of finalize this topic before we move on, it's like I think the only thing that was probably missing is like I totally hear you on like, so Anakin's a slave, and then Padme's like the only good thing in his life, and then he leaves her for 10 years, and Qui-Gon has just died, so he just has like nothing other than Obi-Wan like being a hard ass teaching him, and then he comes back and they finally see each other, and he's like obsessive compulsive about her and everything. But like I think, you know, the only thing that he does that like really seals their relationship from like why she would be attracted to him per se, because he is just such a brat for a lot of the movie, is like when his mom dies and then she feels bad for him after he goes and kills him, and he's like confessing that like, "Oh, I killed everybody," and blah blah blah. And I'm like thinking to myself, maybe if there was a scene or something or some kind of like, because they were on the run, they were on Naboo in the middle of that movie because, you know, Jango was after them and trying to kill her. I wonder if there was like a scene or some sort of like set piece where like he saves her, like other than the obviously in that like, you know, that centipede thing at the beginning, which was kind of, that was more of a tandem effort by him and Obi-Wan. But like if there was like a legit like maybe they were surrounded and he like, you know, was able to protect her, get her out of a very dangerous situation. They latched on. I don't. But
that would have been more organic than the fireplace scene.
Kind of, but again, who am I to judge? Those are my opinions, and I appreciate that we have differing opinions on this because I think it makes for a much more nuanced conversation than if we all just like, yep, it's great, it's fantastic, everything's wonderful. So, Henry, this question's coming to you first. What are some of your favorite characters or factions that were introduced in this film?
First and foremost, I have to go with Jango Fett. I think Jango Fett gave us the Boba Fett we didn't necessarily get. I get that Boba Fett's more of a fan favorite, but in the original trilogy, we didn't really see a lot of Boba Fett. We do now because of The Mandalorian and the actor who played Jango, who now plays Boba, and all the clone troopers. Like, he gave us an entire army of this one actor who is also Aquaman's dad.
Yeah.
And Moana's dad.
Yeah, I mean, he's everyone's dad.
Jesus.
He's even Boba Fett's dad. But I absolutely love that. And I also loved, I think Austin talked about it in our very first episode of Nerdkast, is Count Dooku. Like,
yes,
Christopher Lee is simply amazing. And I think that what I found crazy is the scene. I know in the next film we get like Mace versus Palpatine, but in that scene where Mace Windu first comes out and ignites his lightsaber, I thought it was about to go down between the two of them, but you're looking at Yoda's apprentice versus the highest ranking Jedi in the order, second to maybe only Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
But between those three, between Christopher Lee as Count Dooku, Samuel Jackson as Mace Windu, and the one guy who I can't remember his name as Jango Fett, I thought all three of them were amazing.
Something Tamora or like
Tamoira Morrison.
Tiramisu.
Yeah. How are you gonna do my boy like that? General So's chicken.
Oh, yo, that's straight to the heart, bro.
I'm getting some for Valentine's Day. Tell no one.
No.
Bo, what were some of your favorite factions or characters introduced in this one?
I mean, Henry said it, man. Django and Count, man. Those two are, you're just like I said, two new characters that were introduced to us, and you're like, holy shit. And like I said, my seeing Django like in action to see what these mailers can actually do, and they take out Jedi's, like they could just take them out like that. It's just cool to see that. And then, like I said, and then just Count Dooku's character is just like, holy crap, this guy's ready to do some damage.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like Count Dooku? It's kind of ridiculous. And
you want to with me? So fucking die.
Austin,
Sorry.
What say you, man?
Jango Fett and Boba Fett are bitches that go out like bitches. I have never liked these characters at all, and even this recent rewatch that I had a couple weeks ago, Jango is not a good bounty hunter by any means. He's awful. Like
well, who's bad? I guess if he can kill Jedi,
watch the movie. He doesn't kill anyone except his own hired assassin.
He kills the one Jedi who rushes Count Dooku.
Yeah,
he does kill a Jedi.
That's it.
He does kill a Jedi. But
I see your point.
I had to throw it out there simply because like Boba Fett has this reputation of like being everyone's like absolute favorite badass that gets like less than a minute of screen time, and I'm like, he's a little bitch. Don't defend that. Like, there's nothing redeeming about these guys anyway. Anyway, my favorite characters, Christopher Lee as Count Dooku, because as I said in our first podcast, I absolutely love just watching Christopher Lee act, even if it is just his stunt double. It's still fine. And I do love the just the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. I think they do make up a good portion of this movie, and a good enjoyable portion of this movie. Honestly, I think though, like Natalie Portman does steal the show throughout this entire. I think this is really her movie, especially since when we get to episode 3, she really is just sidelined because there's so much going on with Anakin in particular. So this was definitely Natalie Portman's movie to really shine, and I think she delivered.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I as far as new characters go, I think you guys hit the two big ones. I mean, there's not really, a lot of critically.
Oh shit, Dax.
Oh, Dax. Oh,
Dude. Dude.
Complete.
I gotta fire this to Austin. Dax's Diner and Lego Star Wars.
Yes. Yes.
I remember that. Yeah, that's where you buy all the characters. General Grievous cost a shit ton.
That's one of the best hub worlds in a video game ever. It really is, because you go out to like the street that's there and you just like fight good versus evil for like an endless amount of time. It's
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Best.
Wasn't the prequel trilogy was technically the first Lego Star Wars game, and then they released the original
correct.
trilogy as number 2?
Correct. And then now they've released, or they're going to at least. Well, they did the complete saga, and now they're doing the Skywalker saga, which is like all 9, I think.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. That comes out in May, so I will be playing that. Needless to say,
You got me excited when you said Sokka. It made me think about Airbender.
That's exactly where my mind went. I was like, "Whoops, happy accident."
We need a good Airbender.
Apple yip yip.
Yes.
I mean, Filoni made The Last Airbender, so I mean, we could bring
True.
Appa.
confirmed. Airbenders exist.
Can you imagine Mark Hamill's voice? Favreau was talented, but Star Wars without Filoni is nothing.
So, Bo, I'm going to toss this one to you. What are some of your least favorite aspects of this film, and if you have any ideas as how they could have been done differently?
So I did talk about that scene with the Padme and Anakin in the fireplace. I would have liked to seen that scene maybe like when they were out playing with those weird bald animals when they
The
fell.
big snail horse.
Yeah,
things?
I would have. Yeah, I would have liked to scene like that, but like a sunset area type area, and I don't know, something like you said, something dangerous kind of happens, and he ends up saving her from something that just to something, some event that brings him closer, and then maybe hopefully while he's healing in the fireplace, hope he get better. There's always a sex scene that follows after that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, that's just maybe going a little too crazy about that part. And then the other one was, let me see here. Oh yeah, okay. So this was Anakin. I feel like I mean, are Jedi allowed to like stay in communication with people, like their family? Like I just feel like in space.
Well, attachment is not allowed.
Yeah, so you can't not even family. Like you have to disconnect from.
I think, yeah, and specifically because he's still a Padawan at that point, my guess is that there's some pretty strict rules on any sort of thing, because that was one of the biggest thing Yoda was talking about. Like, I see grave danger in his training because he had that attachment already.
Mm-hmm.
That was hard to let go of. And it's, especially for a kid, I can't imagine being like a 10-year-old and be like, well, my mom's still a slave and I get to go, but, can't ever see her again or talk to her again for the most part. I don't think many Jedi elsewhere even knew their parents, because they would locate them and sense them very early on and get them as children and just be like, that's it, you're done.
Yeah. Dang. Well, I guess that was the kind of thing I just wish there was a way that they could stay in contact with. Maybe there would have been he would have found out sooner, hopefully, but that's what made him what he is now. So I mean,
I just love that. I love that it looks like Mace Windu's just like kind of like goring your neck right now. That's pretty fun.
Take a seat.
I am.
Austin, what are some of your least favorite aspects besides the bounty hunter?
Well, and I won't even beat this dead horse.
No, you should.
Literally.
Anakin and Padme, it's just, again, from a storytelling perspective, it works. I'm all for it. Just like Bo said, it needed to be more organic, in my opinion. It only developed through dialogue, and like, I don't really think that's how a relationship works. Hey,
all right, cool.
Like, we kind of had to be like told that, like, they like each other, not like finding out through like physical interaction, other than I guess like in that one scene on Naboo where he rides that like big fat like pig thing. And they have,
what?
Like, a
what about
like
me? Oh yeah, that's cool. It was a good ride.
Underhand.
Friendly fire.
The main thing, other than that comes to mind, though, is that I really don't feel like we get all this. Again, it's all in the script where like Anakin is meant to become this like powerful Jedi, and I understand he has to get beaten before he can win. So I understand that he loses to Count Dooku. That's totally fine. I just think the lightsaber duel in particular could have been shot a little better. I find in like more recent rewatches that like just the close-ups of everybody's face is just a little awkward, where you just see fans of like light just going around on screen.
It kind of is,
and
because
then,
you have like Dooku go
right, and like then we get like the stunt double versus the CGI frog guy, but with Count Dooku and Yoda right afterwards, and we see the entire thing happen.
Yeah.
So I just feel like Anakin's development as a Jedi is never really portrayed in like lightsaber combat, rather than just like a huge entire like battle conflict. So I mean, we get that.
He's extremely arrogant throughout the movie, isn't he? Like, there's not really many fights he wins in this movie, yet he still kind of acts like he's like invincible. It's very kind of in line with where I think most late teenagers, early 20s type boys especially are kind of in that mindset, because he loses his lightsaber again in the droid foundries, and then he comes out and then he loses his arm to Count Dooku, and he's just like, I
understand you have to like be humbled, so like sure, get your arm cut off. Well, I won't do that next time. Learn my lesson. So like I'll take like a like heavily scripted or heavily choreographed sword fight, like The Princess Bride is a great example. I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about.
Oh, for sure.
The one on top of the mountain between Inigo Montoya and what's his name?
I am not
What's his name? Yeah, this is one of my favorite movies.
Dread Pirate Roberts.
Dread Pirate Roberts. Like I'll take that over just like the close-ups facials that we got of like just Anakin and Count Dooku.
Yeah, that is something that's always
it's like they're about to each other.
Yeah, it's more entertaining that way. You like The Princess Bride has a very entertaining sword fight in it, in that bit, and it's just like this is just kind of like watching two guys like kind of just like shake their heads at each other.
Night at the Roxbury.
Henry, what are some things were there any things in this movie that you would have done differently or that didn't really land for you?
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, once again, like with some of these movies being my favorite Star Wars movies, like there's not too much I would change, because I feel like if I change things, I would kind of make things messy. I mean, one thing in particular is, I don't know if you remember the trailer when it first came out, but the scene where Anakin is dual wielding lightsabers fighting Count Dooku, I thought was the coolest shot in the whole movie, because at the time we had never seen a Jedi dual wield lightsabers. I mean, there was Darth Maul with like the saber staff, but we had never seen two lightsabers at once. But that scene is up very quickly, and then, like you said, they go into the close-up shots. And I remember in the making of the DVD, or making of the movie on the DVD, they were talking about like they really wanted Christopher Lee like to do a lot of the sword fighting. Now, they did bring in a stunt double for some of the later stuff, but like for a lot of it, they actually had Christopher Lee on set doing parts of the fights. And I understand for nostalgia reasons, like being in the same room as Christopher Lee doing a sword fight is massive, especially for a film nerd like George Lucas or any of the other people that were involved. But I definitely agree that that could have been fixed. There could have been more dual wielding. And I also wish that the part between Obi-Wan and Christopher Lee would have been like a little bit longer, because Obi-Wan's never lost a fight in the Star Wars movies except to Christopher Lee, to Count Dooku. But I also see like there's one video on YouTube where it's basically Obi-Wan trolling people in Clone Wars, where he always has something smart to say. Like he always has these puns and these dad jokes and stuff. I think he inherited it kind of. I mean, I'm assuming probably from Qui-Gon, because Qui-Gon was taught by Count Dooku, and you can tell that like the moves aren't as fast as they were in the Darth Maul fight. But what I can tell is like Christopher Lee's so good at just being a troll himself. He's like, "You disappoint me. Master Yoda's trying to mess with you." Like he's getting in his face, and he does the same thing with Anakin in Episode 3. So I thought it was brilliant. And honestly, the only other thing I would have changed is I just wish that the confusion about Master Scythe DS was explained a little bit more, because
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
because in the Bounty Hunter video game, which is one of the reasons I kind of do agree with Austin, where in the movie Django's not given a lot of time. I think it's cool seeing a Mandalorian do his thing live action for the first time, other than Return of the Jedi. But in the Bounty Hunter video game, I absolutely loved playing as Django. And at the prologue, spoilers for Bounty Hunter, the first scene is Count Dooku on his knees in front of Darth Sidious saying, "I'm looking for a host for this army." But what's the whole thing with Scythe DS? I have no idea what that's about.
Yeah, they really didn't even touch on that too much in like the 6th season of Clone Wars, where they touch on it very loosely when Yoda's really trying to figure it out. But that's, as far as the movie's concerned, like I don't think we can force folks to go and watch like 50 hours of Clone Wars just to kind of catch up with what happened to this one movie. And yeah, they really didn't explain it too much. And even I remember in the lead up to it, like they kept calling Christopher Lee's character Darth Tyrannus in like the marketing and a lot of stuff. And then you get into the movie, and I just as a kid, like I was kind of confused the entire time. It's like they just kept calling him Count Dooku, and they only name drop Tyrannus twice, I think, in the whole movie. Once is with Django and once at the very end. And so it's like I would have liked to see him kind of go full Sith Lord, because they never really go with like the full like red-eyed like scary Sith Lord. He's Count Dooku's very like charming and stuff like that, and I think that's part of what they needed as far as like convincing these planets and these systems to become the Separatist Alliance. But it would have been nice to see the like just the full on Darth Tyrannus come out like it does in the like in the Clone Wars TV show. But I think all great points and stuff.
If I may, Spencer, this like at least in the movies, this is like the first real like gentleman Sith Lord that we get. Palpatine Sidious is a politician, sure, but like Count Dooku is like, yeah, he's a very well spoken, sophisticated, gentleman of a character, and that could just be.
He's a political idealist, so he's kind of a philosopher. He's able to like express in almost academic terms kind of where his opinions lie and stuff. But sorry to cut you off.
I was just gonna end on like I really appreciate that, and I think that could just to do with like how Christopher Lee acts in like because he does that in like the movies I've seen anyway. He's a very well sophisticated actor and a very sophisticated character. So that's just something I appreciate.
You look at his bio as like a real person, and it's just like he hunted Nazis, he's been stabbed, he's been in like a million different movies and stuff. So he's like he's a very like the citizen of the world type of person, where he's like very well learned and traveled. He speaks a ton of languages and stuff. The only other thing I'm going to say that's not even like related to the question, but I saw it in like a fan theory long ago about like how Yoda specifically just like hated the fact that he had like the rapier style lightsaber hilt, and something about that and his style of like his technique and all just was like not conducive to like it was really really tough to fight against, like because he was just so proficient, and it like somehow the way it's shaped allowed for much quicker turns and parries and things like that. But yeah.
There's one thing. Sorry, Henry, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Not to get too far into like the next movie or even Clone Wars or anything like that, but like even in the Clone Wars movie and going forward into the show and then finally into episode 3, it's like I think what Count Dooku also represents, and as much as this might be a downer, if anything, I think one of the best scenes in episode 3 was when Anakin kills him, because he's finally proving how powerful he actually is. And we actually touched about it in this movie where it's like he's still a Padawan, he's still learning, he's still getting there. But in that scene where Count Dooku does to what the Emperor tries to do to Luke, and also Darth Vader tries to do to Luke in Empire Strikes Back when they're on Bespin, he's like, use your anger, use your fear, use all these dark side things you should not be using. And then finally Palpatine being able to see this, it's like, okay, one of you is going to die now. And that person, whoever that side is, if Anakin is, he's going to use the Republic to create the Empire. If it's Count Dooku, I'm assuming he's going to use the Separatist army to control everything. So it's literally the fate of the galaxy also, I believe, came down to that fight, and Christopher Lee's character of Count Dooku played such a big part in it. So I strongly believe, like, him in essence, like, as powerful as he was, just showing, like, his might and everything just all came down to Anakin's going to destroy you to prove how powerful he is. So, I mean, that's another reason I have such an appreciation for the character.
You just gave me a tremendous question for whenever we get to the Revenge of the Sith conversation. I can't wait for that one.
I just wanted to say one thing, Spencer, just with things that could have been executed better, because I believe we're still on that question, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
This is the only movie where I really feel like we could have done without the Force just even being mentioned at all. And the reason I say that is because I feel like just the interpretation of the Force, granted, it is kind of left up to interpretation to, like, not just us as a viewer, but like to the people in the universe. But it really muddies itself up in this movie, I noticed, where the Jedi really feel like their vision using the Force has been clouded. And it kind of seems like it only really wants to work when it delivers a good line of dialogue, or it's like heavily convenient to like the scenario that's going on. Like, I'm all for like the idea of midi-chlorians. Like, I wasn't upset with it necessarily. It doesn't have to be this like source of like magic that no one really can explain. But it's just, I feel like the understanding of the Force is just kind of really muddied in this movie.
Yeah.
There's just like certain bits of dialogue that are just kind of like, 1 minute you're not being able to use the Force at all, and the next it's there when it needs to be. So I don't know.
I'm sorry. I do have a brief, like, this is another thing that I actually got into a conversation online, actually not too long ago, about is within episode 1 where Obi-Wan says, I have a bad feeling about this, which I know is mentioned, that line's used in every single movie in Star Wars, but that specifically, and then they touched it more in episode 2, is like episode 1 was the beginning of something big, and they didn't know what it was. In episode 2, when the one guy on Naboo says there hasn't been a full-scale war since the formation of the Republic, my takeaway of it has always been that, like, when something's wrong in the universe, you feel a disturbance in the Force. This was the first war in 1,000 years, and it was going to be a big one, and the whole shift of the galaxy was going to move to a different direction. So my takeaway from it was always that something big was about to go down, but they were so confused. They were feeling the Force acting up in all different kinds of ways, and they couldn't pinpoint what exactly it was. Then at the end of the movie, when Yoda says, the shroud of the dark side has fallen, begun the Clone War has, they thought that it was just going to be this war that they have to fight against the Separatists for the security of the Republic and the security of the galaxy. So now that their vision has been restored because they know what they're fighting against, the problem was, obviously, as we know, is that it was all schemes by Sidious, and so they all, and that goes back into Obi-Wan's line in episode 3 where he says, we were deceived by a lie, we all were.
Gamers.
Very interesting points all around. I love hearing everybody's thoughts on this one specifically, because it really is, it is the start of a huge paradigm shift in the universe, like much more so than episode 1. Like episode 1's kind of a primer, and then this one really does just open it up for almost like all out chaos across the galaxy when you think of it more on like a macro level. But anyways, going to Austin now, what are some of your favorite set pieces or like through lines of the film?
My favorite set piece for a long time as a kid was the droid conveyor belt. It was like we finally got like a good action set piece, and like as a kid I loved that. I loved watching, just Jedi in their prime just like hacking and slashing away at like just droids. Nowadays I just really appreciate basically the entire third act of the movie, because we finally get away from like all the political drama, which like growing up or being grown up now I can like understand and comprehend a little more. But like we're finally away from the love story, we're finally away from the politics and all just the talking and dialogue. And I just love watching Jedi just do what we always think Jedi are just meant to do, which is just hack away. So
yeah, that
I love it.
Battle of, or specifically inside the arena, from like when they're brought out and like strung up on those pillars all the way to when Yoda shows up and forms the perimeter and takes him out. You know,
on the perimeter.
That's probably some of the best Star Wars we got in any movie, in my opinion. Like, that's the Star Warsiest Star Wars. But Henry, what about you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to throw in that I also really like the first real action set that we get, which is the chase between Obi-Wan and Anakin versus
Sam
I don't
Russell.
remember the where we just get a lot of banter between the two of them, where like you can tell it's Master and Padawan. Padawan is acting too boldly, and you know, Obi-Wan is doing his best, and it's obvious that he struggles with being a master.
Well, it is,
he's
again,
just doing his
that
best.
Like big brother, little brother kind of, not even, it's like, it's part rivalry, but it's also like, you can tell Anakin respects him, but he also doesn't want to like have to listen to him either, because he feels like he is more powerful in a lot of ways. But anyways, Henry, set pieces and through lines that you really enjoyed?
Well, I actually agree with Austin with both of them. Like when it comes to Battle of Geonosis, which I definitely think set the tone of the entire Clone Wars. And I remember as a kid just being like, this is unreal. And now we have 7 seasons of a show, plus the 2D animation show that came on Toonami between episodes 2 and 3 that took an even deeper dive into the Clone Wars, which also introduced General Grievous. And also that chase in the beginning I also mentioned with where they're going after Zeb. And you get to take an in-depth look at Coruscant, because in episode 1, something I always felt that we were robbed of is you go to this city that is the capital city of this republic that you imagined when we were like 4 or 5 years old, when like the thought of what happened before A New Hope was just unfathomable. So you go to this giant world that is just one giant city, and you don't really get to see any of it. And other than Palpatine kind of like politicking, none of it really excited me. But then when you see the inside of Coruscant and you see the streets and the places, whether you're in the cantina or Dexter's Diner and just like all these cool places that you get to go, it kind of goes back to the Harry Potter thing where it's like we're stepping into a new world again, which was a feeling in Star Wars I hadn't really felt since the end of Return of the Jedi, because every movie in the original trilogy brought you to somewhere. That was definitely it for me, was just like seeing all of Coruscant. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, and I mean, just the concept in itself of a whole planet that is one city, that is also the capital, I think is, it still kind of boggles the mind of, because like you think of how big like the Earth is, and who knows how big Coruscant is in comparison. But just like that's pretty darn huge, and how like, you know, of course we don't really get it in this movie, but you do eventually find out in the Clone Wars series that there's like lots of sub levels, and like as you go like further into the core and the inner like street level, there's like a ton of poverty, and it's like it's not just this like shining city on a hill or anything like that. Like there is the Senate, there's the Jedi Temple, but there's like a ton of just like poverty and like bad stuff and like seedy underbelly of Coruscant too. That
you want to buy some death sticks?
Yeah, I didn't want to buy some just. All right, Bo. Set pieces.
Yeah, but my question is: Coruscant built like from the city in out, like, or is it like built around like a planet? That's just what I'm just curious. Like,
I'm sure there's a book that you could buy at Barnes and Noble that's hidden away in a corner that'll tell you everything you need to know about Coruscant.
How is it made?
I bet you there's a guy on YouTube somewhere, just like Charlie, and It's Always Sunny with like a chalkboard behind him.
Oh shoot, yeah. So for me, definitely the Battle of Geonosis is a highlight, man. Just seeing anything involving lightsabers. That's why I love Star Wars. Is so like when we first got Darth Maul, and you know, and seeing that was just like I was all in. And then we get this big battle. You're just like, oh, that fucking sabers everywhere, and to just see that for the first time is pretty awesome. And then I really like the fight between Obi-Wan and Jango, even though that Camino is, I like that feeling of this just vast ocean and just like little, this little compared to the planets. It's just, I just really like this is the vibe of that whole piece. And it was just, I just like the whole.
I 100% agree. I'm glad you brought that up, because like, you know, Camino did a lot in this story. Like, it was erased from the Jedi archives, so it took a youngling to kind of help Obi-Wan even figure out what happened. And so then he goes there, and you're right, like, you'd never seen a planet in the Star Wars canon up to that point that is like all water, and it's basically these like city islands, you know, almost like Cloud City, but just in like a flooded water planet that's constantly storming, to my knowledge. And then, you go in there and like the character design of the Kaminoans is really cool. And it's like really super polished in there, and you get to see like the clones in their various stages of growth acceleration and stuff like that. And that's where you get to meet Jango Fett like one-on-one for the first time. And there, like for me at least, I think there's a ton of tension in like the staring contest that you and Tomoira have. He's just like,
oh yeah, tiramisu.
Possibly.
Where's my tiramisu, you fuck?
I'll actually say this. The one redeeming quality that Jango has for me, and it's not even anything relating to Jango. Well, it relates to him, of course, but it's not Jango himself.
But is he unchained?
Actually, after Mace Windu, he's Jango unbrained.
Oh.
Damn.
The chase sequence with the blast charges, that is probably the coolest sound effect I've ever heard in a movie, just hands down.
Seismic,
watch that
charges.
Watch that on a really nice like sound system, or like with really nice headphones on, and
with
like
the bass cranked up.
Oh my god, it's
Stop with the bass, man.
Yeah.
I agree. Not
only that, but they also you get to see kind of the Jedi Starfighter for the first time, which I thought was a really cool ship design. That was and obviously you got legit Slave One action, because you did not get any of that. You saw Slave One, but you didn't get any dogfighting action.
I want to know how much shields Obi-Wan had, because he was getting lit up. It was like,
nope, that's why Jango sucks. Jango can't hit for shit.
Dude,
it was a great set piece. But yeah, Kamino, and there was one other I wanted to bring up, but I kind of forgot. But yeah, the entire Battle of Geonosis, or I should say the first Battle of Geonosis, because when they came back there, everything had pretty much been undone in the show. But yeah, that I will never forget being in the theater as a little kid, and now I'm all serious and critical about like what's actually happening. But as a kid, it was like just everything I ever wanted was to be able to, watch all these Jedi in an arena just fighting to the death against like a literal outnumbering droid army. And then Yoda shows up and the clone troopers come in, and it's just, you kind of step back a little bit from the spectacle and everything, and you realize just like the death toll that probably occurred there for the clones. Like they probably lost tons and tons of troops there.
I wanted to see a kill count for Mace Windu, like as he's killing people during the battle when he's in the corner.
Interesting you brought up Mace Windu, because like for Mace Windu, I know like the argument goes like Mace Windu would always tap into this forbidden dark side power, but when he kills Jango, does that mean he's tapping into the dark side? Because I know Yoda says you only use the Force for attack and defense. And at this point, Jango had tried to kill Senator Amidala. He already killed a Jedi or two, maybe more. At this point, I'm sure Mace Windu was like, okay, fair game, dead. But, like, even if you watch, like, Rebels and Kanan Jarrus defeats the Grand Inquisitor after he smashes his lightsaber, he doesn't kill the Inquisitor. The Inquisitor kills himself because he wouldn't tap into that. So I guess my question is, was Mace Windu using the dark side to kill Jango?
Well, I don't necessarily think so, because he is literally the at least top 3 most powerful Jedi at the time. And I think Jango, if he doesn't kill Jango, Jango kills more Jedi. He had already killed one. There's potential that he's killing more. And who knows, he shoots off a bunch of rounds while he's on the ground. Like, who knows if he caught a couple Jedi with those, just he's too much of a threat to be left alive, and Jedi don't have any qualms about killing if it's in the protection of others and people they deem innocent, especially their own rank members.
Him out like the bitch he was.
Again, to be fair, Jango Fett was allegedly he had gotten that armor from somebody else. He wasn't like a true born and bred Mandalorian. And not only that, I mean, he had beat Kumari Vosa in the game, but he never fought a Mace Windu. And I mean, I don't think of many people during that era who could have gone toe to toe with Mace. I mean, there's, again, not to
Mace Windu beat Palpatine.
Yeah, I mean, not exactly. Yeah, he could have killed Sidious if it wasn't for Anakin, sticking his nose and things. But anyways, I could get super into the weeds. Oh, that was the last thing I wanted to say, going back to the fight between Obi-Wan and Jango, is that there's a ton of history between the Mandalorians and the Jedi, obviously, about like the wars that they had, and how, it's touched on in Rebels, how the only reason the Jedi won is because the Mandalorians would try to use all their gadgets and tricks and stuff, but they could beat them in every facet. So it was really cool to see like something that would then get expanded upon later with like the Legend of Tar Vizsla and Sabine training with Kanan and Ezra. There's a ton of stuff that kind of ends up being piggybacked on that one fight, like visually and everything else. I thought it was pretty cool. So, all right, Henry, do you like the use of CGI in the film, or would you have preferred they had stuck with more practical effects?
Well, I always have to go practical effects. I understand the reasoning for CGI, and also these were at the time like some of the revolutionary effects. Like this is when they really started getting into some of the codes. I remember Ahmed Best was talking about and the character design for Jar Jar Binks when they did episode 1, they were literally programming a brand new code that completely revolutionized what CGI was, which is another reason, like when we talk between either CGI effects or even the sound effects, like we talked about the seismic charge from Slave One, these movies are so innovative and they're creating new sounds that we've never heard before, at least not magnetized to what we've heard before. And also the scale of the CGI that they're using. There are a few parts because I watched that fight on Geonosis so many times that some of the CGI Jedi way in the back, literally they got a little bit lazy with it, where there was this one Jedi who swings his lightsaber, turns around, and there's a droid already on the ground, takes his lightsaber like this and stabs it. They inserted that CGI 3 times in that stadium alone. And I think at that point and I know that's like really nitpicking, but I mean, it's still noticeable because
like in the butt crack, you like pulled a piece of hair out the butt crack right there.
Okay.
But even
hot take,
then,
I don't even
and I will say, like, also I feel like I've always preferred Puppet Yoda, but obviously for him to fight, like they had to do it otherwise. I know like that's a big divider in Star Wars fans is pro Yoda with a lightsaber and anti Yoda with a lightsaber. I'm pro Yoda with a lightsaber because if he's that strong with the Force, like as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing that Yoda can't do with the Force. I know that he walks slowly with the cane and everything, but I mean, so did the Emperor in Return of the Jedi.
I hate that he has a lightsaber.
Really?
I want to hear this opinion.
Yeah.
Looks like a fucking child. He's using a youngling's lightsaber. And he's a master fucking Jedi.
Well, he's also 3 feet nothing.
Yeah, and he's so powerful. Obviously, like even Dooku was like, okay, let's just settle this with lightsabers. I can't fuck with you fucking mentally because you're just destroying me. No competition. I know Jedi is supposed to have, that's their weapon of choice. He has to have one, but to be like good at that, I don't know, man. It's just.
I can totally understand why you might like that. For me, that worked just because I think of it like in a practical sense of, okay, so he's got a shorter lightsaber and he's studied the form that is like excessive movement, jumping around and stuff.
Yeah. That
would be terribly difficult for anybody that's not a master class, either Jedi or Sith, to take on, in my opinion. Like, if he hadn't gone up against Dooku, I think he probably would have slaughtered just about anybody he had gone up against, in my opinion, just because, like, how do you block this crazy, like, 3 foot tall, like, super master Jedi coming at you all angles?
Yeah, I think maybe it's the style of his fighting. Like, the jumping is just too... I feel like if he just started cutting people's legs off, I can get on board with that. Like, you literally, like, he's so fast, like, and he's just cutting people's legs off until you get down to his level. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. There's also only one other person who has mastered that specific fighting style, that form in the movies, and it's Palpatine. And the only time we actually saw it demonstrated was between his fight with Mace Windu, when he's literally, I know you've seen the meme where it's like...
he did a harpoon, the little fucking twirly.
He does a full 920 from a prone position.
And he makes that noise that's like terrifying. Like,
Austin, what about you, man? How about the CGI on this? What do you think?
Well, it's definitely a step up from the Phantom Menace. I have no personal issue with CGI. The only thing is that I think practical effects are what I prefer, only because I do buy into the whole movie magic concept. there's the famous shot of the AT-AT at the Battle of Hoth where you can actually see like the peg in the ground of it like launching it over, which is like totally fine. If you know it's there, you know it's there. If you don't, you'll never see it. I think there's just a real charm to watching, puppets or practical effects rather than CGI. I feel like CGI can sometimes be a little bit lifeless. And if you want to talk about lifeless CGI, just wait till we talk about The Hobbit. But
yeah,
it's just like
it is
for this movie. For this movie, it works just because like this is a world that like we will never be able to achieve on a practical level. We'll never be able to film on a practical level. And I mean, there's no denying that the environments that they're able to create are beautiful and stunning. And I think they're a step up again from Phantom Menace, and they're even further expanded on in Revenge of the Sith. So yeah, I'm for it. I think it's fine. It's just that my own personal taste point me in the direction of using practical effects. And one thing I know they really wanted to drive home, and I know I've seen this in the behind the scenes footage, I know that they really wanted to make Yoda especially like a living, breathing CGI character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they accomplished that. I really did. Like, I get the sense that he's really there. We know he's not, of course, but he looks like a legit physical thing with these actors.
It's tough because, like Henry was kind of touching on, this was like state-of-the-art technology, a lot of which hadn't even been invented until they did it. And I want to say they even waited to do the prequels for quite a while because they didn't want to like use only what they had available to them back in like the 80s. But of course, nowadays we have things like 4K and, hyper, focused, realistic, monitors and sound bars and just everything that really, you can tell what is and what isn't. But at the time, getting this on VHSs were very much the thing still. DVDs were very new at the time. I mean, you really didn't notice it quite as bad as being like, oh, well, that's CGI and that's not, because you had a little bit more graininess to the actual picture itself. So, it's one of those interesting conversations where it's like, unfortunately for me, the CGI doesn't hold up quite so well in some aspects, more so like the backgrounds and environments than the actual characters themselves. But it's one of those unfortunate things that just over time, certain movies based on the CGI that was available to them at the time, they don't quite age as well just from like a visual standpoint. But I have to backtrack for 1 second. There's one set piece that I really enjoyed that I forgot to touch on a second ago, which was Anakin going and killing the Sand People on Tatooine. I thought was a very pivotal and interesting moment. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's the only other, or one of the only other times we get a Duel of the Fates music cameo. He's like, driving through the Boonta Eve, what I assume is part of the... And then he just goes and slaughters all the Sand People, and that's really one of the giant like turning points for him, because after that point, to my knowledge, especially in like Clone Wars and then in Revenge of the Sith, like he just does not have any qualms about killing things after that, because he's just like, well, I killed
women and the children.
And just to add on to that, Spencer, I feel like Anakin's overall turn to the dark side could have been sold a lot better if we got more of those moments where we saw the internal turmoil where he has, especially with Count Dooku in episode 3. We'll touch on that obviously in a later episode, but the I shouldn't, it's, and the whole line, it's not the Jedi way. I think we needed more of the internal struggle rather than the I'm complaining about this because it's not what I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's becoming attached to Padme and just pretty much disobeying every order Obi-Wan and the Jedi Council gave him from his first mission to kind of watch over her while she was, kind of being hidden from Jango. He kind of disobeys everything and there doesn't ever appear to be any sort of punishment or like, what do they do after he just disobeys him with her the entire time? And I guarantee you somebody must have sensed that there was something going on. What do they do after they get off of Geonosis? They send him by himself to take her back home again.
Well, Yoda sensed that. He said, oh, great disturbance, Anakin, pain, suffering.
Right. But after he kills all the Sand People is when he finally starts, well, I don't know if he really questions it, but he does say to himself or to Padme, I'm a Jedi. I know I'm better than this. So like you get that struggle where like I've done this awful thing that I shouldn't have.
Well, like, it's really what they needed more of, I would agree.
Well, I have to respond to that only because, and I totally respect the opinions. I just hope I can just say that before what I go into.
But you're wrong.
I respect you. You're wrong. Here's what I got, motherfucker.
As long as we all leave friends, I'm totally good. The reason I completely disagree is because as the movie aged, I kind of see it a little more clearly, like with like it kind of making sense in terms of like every piece of Anakin is torn apart one by one by one, and it's all. And this isn't just like extended lore or what happens in Clone Wars or anything like that, but like even on screen, I know they're trying to the fish hook in, like Ahsoka turning and leaving him is another big reason for his downfall, which is totally fine. That can be canon. But like even in the movies alone, like from him, like, you know, being born as a slave and then leaving his mother, Qui-Gon dying, his mother dying in his arms, Obi-Wan tormenting him for 10 years, the one girl that he's loved, or really the only out of the three people he's ever really loved, just Qui-Gon, who was there and gone, and then brought him away for his mom. Then Natalie Portman or Padme, who's there and then she's not there, then she's back and he can't be with her, even though she wants to be with him and he wants to be with her. And then, of course, but one other thing I've noticed, like in my rewatch of this movie, is all those little scenes of like Emperor Palpatine just planning his scenes one by one. They asked him to go see him before he takes her back home because he wanted Palpatine to convince Padme to actually go back home, which he didn't want to do because of the vote. And when that happens, you even hear him saying, I've said it before, you're the most gifted Jedi I've ever met. Hey, look, they finally trusted you with an assignment. He's playing him against the Jedi from day one. And he even says in episode 3, he's watched out for me ever since I arrived here. He stepped into the role of father, knowing that this young, very optimistic boy could be turned so easily because he literally has used his fears and his angers against him ever since he started. And then even when we get to the scene with his mother, all of that anger and frustration that he had for Obi-Wan, where he's like, oh, we have to be mindful of the living force. Like, oh, dreams pass in time. And all the times he had been belittled by him saying, we're not going to go through this exercise again. I hate it when he does that. Why do I get the feeling you're going to be a death to me? He's constantly looking for some kind of self, like almost acceptance or self-worth that he's not getting from anybody. And going back to it again, the only 3 people in the whole story that ever gave it to him was his mother, Padme, and Qui-Gon. And at this point, when his mother is dead, so his father and mother figure are both dead, so he's stuck with only Padme. But in that moment where he's just losing it, it's because he's focusing it back on Obi-Wan. And because of all the things like he had consistently said, but also it goes back to, like I said before, Palpatine just placing those seeds into his head and further making him realize this is all their fault for bringing me in this way and for basically creating me for what I have to be. But they're not telling me the things I want to know. They're not telling me all these big, bad, dark secrets of the Force that I know they're not telling me. And also, there is envy between Obi-Wan and Anakin. I've also heard the side that Obi-Wan's not like that. He just sees the darkness in Anakin from the beginning. I think the thing we forget, and I kind of saw it on my rewatch, is that the Jedi were corrupt. Palpatine was right. They didn't want to give up their power. They thought that they knew what was best for the Republic. And even Qui-Gon also kind of started picking up on it. And I think that's why Christopher Lee left in the first place. So, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, but basically at that point in time, there were so many boiling emotions for Anakin that we already see on screen that I don't see it as there was something that had to be fleshed out. I think it was already on the screen.
There's a lot to unpack there for sure. It's definitely good points. The only thing that really sticks out to me that I have to either push back or I disagree upon is that, you know, Anakin could have been a little more grateful. I mean, it's easy to say like, oh, well, Obi-Wan's such a dick and whatever, but it's like, you know, the Jedi wanted nothing to do with him. They said no. And Qui-Gon said, well, I'll just train him and quit and whatever. And then when Qui-Gon died, Obi-Wan promises, I will train him if that's, you know, your final wish and stuff. And yes, he's tough on him, but I mean, there's not a single master who wasn't tough on their apprentice. And so it's just like it's kind of like boyish arrogance and stuff just kind of gets on my nerves sometimes, where it's like, it's not completely on the Jedi to just like cater to your every whim. And of course you point out that like then you have somebody like Darth Sidious who's sitting there in the background who's like, yeah, they're so wrong. Why don't they do that for you? And just like trying to play him against them. And that's of course what eventually leads to him, his downfall and becoming Darth Vader. But it's just it's kind of frustrating for me because it's like he even admits it when he's having his big bitch fit to Padme, where he's just like, well, yeah, I mean, I am thankful that I'm Obi-Wan's apprentice because he's wiser than Master Yoda and more powerful than Master Windu. I'm very grateful to be his apprentice, and just like I'm sure in some way he's acknowledging also the lineage of like Qui-Gon to Obi-Wan to him now. So I it's frustrating for me sometimes that it's just like, if you just would have listened, like I have this with a lot of people all the time. It's like, I try to be the person who's not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I think you probably need to hear to either get over a certain situation or to help grow. And he just didn't want to hear it most of the time. He just wanted to be whoever he wanted to be and thought these rules shouldn't apply to him. But again, that's just my opinion. So moving on, I think we are on Bo now. Are there any aspects of the film you noticed on this playthrough that you may not have noticed before?
I think I didn't have much to say on the CG part, but as far as preference goes, I do like practical effects. As far as if you're interacting with something up close, I do like practical, but I feel like you can use CG if it's kind of more broader and farther away, it's done right. But I prefer, if you're going to do something CG, just do 100% CG like the Clone Wars did. And if you're going to use live actors, just go all practical as much as you can. And a good example is Aliens. The second Aliens franchise is like one of my favorite movie of all times, and that was all practical effects. And then when they went to Alien 3, they used like a CG like dog alien, and it looks so bad, mixing with this live environment. So as far as CGI goes, practical as much as you can, but if it's up close, but CGI is good if it's done right, I feel like. And then moving on to stuff that I missed. Let's see, I wrote it down. Okay.
Hey, Poggle.
Okay, so Anakin's a cold motherfucker. This dude killed, like I said, women and children. He was pissed. I mean, and then also Padme for sticking with him through that. I'm like, dang, it's like, how where you have to love somebody to stick around through them to something like that. That's pretty crazy. So you kind of, I noticed how much they actually care about each other with that point now, seeing that recently, just now. And another thing is like how clean Anakin was when he brought Shmi back after murdering this whole village of Tusken Raiders. He was clean as a whistle. Just
you
like
figure a lightsaber instantly cauterizes any wound.
Yeah, it was clean cuts. Yeah, all around. So yeah, and there was nothing. And I was like, damn, he just. Okay, nice.
Austin, what about you? Or sorry, were you done? Or
yeah.
No worries. Austin, anything you might not have seen before?
The thing is that I think I mentioned it in our first talk ever. This was my first Star Wars movie, so I've been watching this since I was like 6 or 7 years old. So again, even as a kid and an adult, I've watched this movie. I've lost count. So I can't really say there's too much where it's like, wow, I like never noticed that before, because I guess this one's probably the one I have memorized most. I would feel like there's certain little like lines here and there where it's like, oh, I forget that was said, but nothing that really pops out to me where it's just, oh my God, I can't believe I never realized that before. The only thing I can really say is that I'm able to comprehend more of the bits of dialogue, especially on like the political side.
Sure.
That like it just makes the movie starts to make more sense as I get older. I start to view it through more educated eyes and more adult eyes. And
I'm sure your attention span, of course, is a little bit more developed now than when you're a kid and you're just like, oh, what's that?
I think my opinions of the movie, like it used to be one of my favorites, but it has gone down the list of my favorite movies. Definitely, it's definitely lower half now. And I think that's only because, as I'm old and more cynical towards everything. Like, I love pointing out flaws or like personal flaws that I tend to not like. So, like, I've touched on the things that I don't like, and I don't want to come across as like someone who like absolutely hates this movie.
Not at all.
Like,
No.
I will never say I like hate this movie because, you know, or I'll hate specifically this Star Wars movie unless it's Rise of Skywalker.
Understandable.
But that's just me.
Well, and two, I mean, as we grow and as time goes on, more and more franchises come around, more movies and content that we like really enjoy. And so it kind of like, I know for me specifically, Game of Thrones is like a game changer as far as like how I perceive, especially like epic fantasy and, you know, kind of just the level of storytelling, especially in the first 6 seasons of Game of Thrones, as opposed to, you know, just a bevy of like when I was little, I thought, you know, Underworld was like one of the greatest franchises ever. And then of course you go on and you're just like, well, you know, it's they're okay, but there's so much, in my opinion, better stuff out there. But it's interesting how perception and things change over time and life experiences shape it. But Henry, is there anything you noticed this time or?
I think Austin hit it on the head with the political aspect of it because, I mean, any scene that had Palpatine as a kid, I just wasn't paying attention. But I think that was the entire galaxy. No one was paying attention. But now, as you're older, it's like, oh my God, it was right in front of you. And you see in the few scenes we get with Palpatine and Anakin together, because if you don't watch Clone Wars, you don't really see them develop in the movies. You do have that one scene, and it's implied that he's always looked after Anakin in some way. But now, like, you have that little scene. I think that might actually be one of the best scenes in the entire movie is where he's just having a normal conversation with him. And he's like, I've said it before, you're one of the most gifted Jedis I've ever met. And just to see that relationship to where it goes. And the only other thing I didn't recognize, of course, until Dave Filoni's thing on The Mandalorian, where he talks about the meaning of Duel of the Fates, where there was a reason, or the meaning behind it in episode 1 during the Darth Maul fight, and then they play it again. Because I always associated Duel of the Fates with Darth Maul because of that fight, even when you see him briefly in Solo, or when you see him in Rebels, and I think parts of Clone Wars too, they're playing that dun 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 dun. But that song isn't Darth Maul's theme song. It's about Anakin's pull to the dark side, and you hear it 3 times throughout the prequels. You hear it once during the Darth Maul fights, the second time when he's on the speeder, and the third time when he's battling Obi-Wan. So just to see the meaning behind it and how this is one of his core moments of when he's going down that dark path. But I also have to say, like, in terms of the visuals, when the song plays, when he's on that bike and he just looking into the sun with that angry, full of hate look, like, that's one of those shots that I look at and I'm just like, that is an amazing shot. Like, that is cinema movie magic. It was the same.
John Williams hitting that cue with that music too.
Oh yes. That's exactly how it felt when, like, when Darth Maul first comes out and he removes his hood and just the horns and then the scenery behind him. It's like, that's one of those moments I look at. It's like, that is excellent cinematic entertainment. And I think that's what I've always taken away from these first 2 movies is there's so many moments like that. It's also the same thing with, like, when you look at Yoda when he first walks into the room with Count Dooku and then he starts using the Force to move the rocks. It's like, that's a callback to Empire Strikes Back. It's excellent cinematic entertainment.
There's one thing I remembered real quick, just one thing in particular, and maybe it's a hill I'll have to die on, I'm not sure. But there is no one in the Star Wars universe other than Samuel L. Jackson that will ever deliver the line, "This party's over."
With the implied MFer behind it.
It's only because Mace Windu was played by Samuel L. Jackson does that line exist in this movie.
That is one of those things that, like, gets, like, kind of ages like fine wine over time. It's just that Samuel L. Jackson is, like, just one of the baddest asses ever in this franchise and just beyond. But Henry brought up 2 interesting points, I thought. One specifically with the, with Palpatine, it's like, yeah, as a kid, those are totally like kind of throwaway scenes, and I just you tune out and you're just like, when's the lightsabers coming back, kind of thing. But you get older and you realize how critically important what he was doing the entire time, like on all levels, whether it was manipulating the Senate or manipulating Anakin, and just kind of speaks to his terrible psychotic genius and everything. And then too, the shot of him on the bike, and it's just so iconic with some of the most iconic music behind it, and just visually kind of playing off what you were saying. It's like when he does the pod race, it's very bright and everything, because I think like, tonally that's a very positive point for it. Like it's tense and there's stakes and everything, but that's a very positive moment in Anakin's life when he wins the Boon to Eve race. But then like he goes back and, it's dark because he's just like, everything's changed. Things are in a much worse state than he would have wanted them in. And it's kind of like just visually, it's subconsciously telling you like, bad stuff is going down.
I never thought of it that way. That's a really good point.
And he's already pissed because he's surrounded by damn sand.
Sand. It gets everywhere.
I hate it.
That could probably be one of my things that like, it was just like, was that really necessary? Like nobody likes sand. Like sand.
And then on top of that, sand people killed his mom.
We didn't have showers on Tatooine. I had sandy cheeks. The chafing was horrible. We didn't have Bengay.
They made the Reddit meme before Reddit was even a website.
Dirty.
I think we are on Austin now, and this is going to be the one I think that might, cause some butting heads or some different opinions, but I'm very, very curious about everybody's thoughts on this. And it is, what are your opinions of Hayden Christensen's performance as Anakin Skywalker? I see Darth Henry down there ready to just like stab somebody in the face.
I do defend Hayden Christensen. I do. And I think it's the only thing I have to say really, it's what I've always said, is just, I think Hayden Christensen did the best that he could with what he was given. And that's
Henry's
just a nice little like
Steve
summary.
Buscemi and Billy Madison right now. You just like crossed your name off his hit list.
Like, Henry, you just can't wait for me to be wrong. But like, no, that's truly how I feel. I don't think it was necessarily bad. I just think he was told that it was okay without really any filter, anyone tapping him on the shoulder saying like, that wasn't all that great. If someone, I'm not blaming George Lucas, even though like at the end of the day, like this is George Lucas's vision. I mean, he's gone on record saying, I think at least, that he's not the greatest at writing a screenplay. And it's painfully obvious that he's not very good at writing, especially like more romantic dialogue. So with that in mind, it's just that like Hayden Christensen is not a bad actor at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think he really shines in episode 3. Like I said earlier, I think this is definitely Natalie Portman's movie.
Mm.
And then I think, Hayden Christensen really gets his in episode 3. So again, I don't think the portrayal was bad. I just think it's like what he was given was not good.
I forget who actually did like the screenplay for this, because I think of like with the original trilogy, I know George Lucas was like pretty much the sole proprietor of A New Hope, but like Lawrence Kasdan stepped in and really helped with Empire Strikes Back, and I think then George might have taken over again for Return of the Jedi, and that's I think universally understood to be one of like the lesser, as far as like dialogue goes, not necessarily in my opinion, but just in general. I think people look at like Empire Strikes Back as far as dialogue and like interactions between characters is like kind of the gold standard for this franchise. But
as far as I know, George Lucas did write the screenplay for the entire prequel trilogy.
Mm,
I know he did for 3 because I've seen the behind the scenes for 3 like countless times.
It is tough that, it again, it probably lands for different people of different ages at different points in their lives, like completely differently. But I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about all this?
I mean, this is one of those questions that's like, I've had this conversation countless times with people who wanted to have it, people who didn't want to have it. I mean, I've annoyed Kate so many times with just explaining like my theories on it, and she's like, I don't care. But But I mean, the thing is, like, when channeling Anakin Skywalker, which already was an impossible task, like, you had, before we were even born, the people who had grown up with the original trilogy and just had this massive expectation, but you had to blend, like, people went into the prequel trilogy expecting Darth Vader. The problem is he also had to channel his inner Luke Skywalker. And the thing is, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader are two very different characters in their prime when we last see them in Return of the Jedi, or even when you go back to A New Hope and you see the younger version of Luke. And my current, or my recent rewatch of the original trilogy is, like, most times when I hear people talk about, like, oh, Luke is so whiny and everything, I usually hear them only talk about New Hope, not even bringing up his character when he first gets to the Dagobah system in episode 5, where he's like, I need to find Yoda. I don't know what I'm doing here. We're wasting our time. Like, Hayden had this impossible task of having to channel both of them somehow. You have to be able to see the Luke Skywalker and even the Princess Leia inside of how Anakin acted and behaved, but he also had to make the role his own. And he also, or the character his own, because he's not the exact same person, but he also had to channel Darth Vader. So you have all these mixtures that were going into this very impossible task. And with that all in mind, when you actually line them up, I think it really works effectively, because the whininess obviously is there, and I'll never deny that is there, but it was meant to be there. And the same way you hear Luke freaking out, you hear Anakin freaking out, even of the more or less important things, which is just like, oh, it's all Obi-Wan's fault, or Luke being like, where's Yoda? Like, just things like that. Then you have the Darth Vader lines, which I think were more prominent in the next film, which, I mean, there's a whole discussion on that film in the next episode, but particularly if you listen to how his delivery is, and you think of James Earl Jones's voice doing those same lines, because he's very robotic, like the yes, master. That is Darth Vader. It has Darth Vader written all over it. And even his mannerisms, the way he walks, the way he interacts with other people, he's always standing tall. He's always very proud of who he is. He only ever breaks that stance that the Jedi kind of instilled with him. And then he did it even more when he was walking around with Palpatine. He only ever breaks that when he's with Padme, because he's actually just being himself. He's not being the slave boy on Tatooine. He's not being the Jedi Padawan. And even in the next movie, he's not being the Jedi Knight that he had become. He only ever breaks that when he's around Padme. I think, so with all those things in mind, like, I think Hayden Christensen had an impossible task from the beginning, and I think he played it exactly as he was supposed to. I just think a lot of people, like, going into this movie just wanted, like, full-on Star Wars, and I think Stan Lee said it really great, not to bring up another movie, but Stan Lee was talking about Spider-Man 2 when it first came out, where a lot of people complained about that movie because they just wanted more. There's only 2 fights between Doc Ock and Spider-Man, and they were like, we want more good guy versus the bad guy. And Stan Lee was like, you have to give people a reason to care. And if it was all just fighting, we wouldn't care. Like, this is a character that we really want to know more about. We want to know, what was he like? What was his personality like? Like, who was he? And when Luke says there's still good in him, I can feel it. I have to pull him back to the good side. After decades of being Darth Vader and killing Jedi and attacking the Rebel Alliance and causing tyranny across the entire galaxy, after all that, he must have been a really good person before all that went down, which we see. And I'll even go back to Jake Lloyd in episode 1, where he says to his mom, you always say that the biggest problem in this universe is that nobody helps each other. He went from that to Darth Vader. So for Luke to sense that kind of good, where Darth Vader is an incredible negative, there must have been an incredible positive to start that all off, which is why I think Hayden Christensen did a fantastic job.
Yeah, the impossible task is really, cannot be said enough for what was on his plate with this, because take away all the dialogue that might have been misplaced and just a lot of things that maybe I thought didn't land quite as well. Just from a very, like, macro level, once again, people have thought about in their own minds the legend and legacy of Anakin Skywalker since A New Hope when he was first mentioned. and just the whole idea of him. At first, people thought that he was killed by Vader. Then it turned out he became Vader, and Vader, in all but actuality, he killed him through the persona of Anakin Skywalker. And so, we sat with that in our minds. Some people sat as long as like 20 or 23 or so years. And then for this guy to have to come in and, like, I think partly what you were saying, it's like, so you get the, like, kind of, wide-eyed optimist of Jake Lloyd's Anakin in episode 1. And then obviously we get the turn to Darth Vader in episode 3. But episode 2 is really the kind of just the in-between moment. It's meant to set up a lot of what is to come, a lot of the foreshadowing and stuff. And so I can't imagine as an actor that's an easy task whatsoever. And when you're given what, in my opinion, is semi-questionable, like, direction and dialogue, as far as like what I perceive was more on George Lucas, how he kind of directed him in those scenes, it's so tough. And I hesitate to sit here and judge too hard, because it's one of those things where it's like, of course I couldn't do it, but I think, like, would anybody really be able to go into that situation and deliver to the level that we needed or wanted? And I don't know. I don't know if anybody could have done it better. And it's a very subjective question and conversation, but
well, if I may, like, just a couple points. Again, I think you guys are further supporting my opinion of, as a story, I completely buy into it and I completely accept it. I just think watching it being performed in front of me is just like what specifically does not land for me. So, but I also wanted to say that, like, this is a problem that I think a lot of people had. I'm skipping way too far ahead with The Last Jedi, where I think Star Wars fans as individuals are their own worst enemies, where we love to shoot ourselves in the foot. And the reason I say that is because, again, with Rey's lineage in particular, Star Wars fans love coming up with their own theories. I'm not trying to generalize, because, like, everyone does it. Everyone has theories about everything. And, like, Star Wars fans are no exception.
Mm-hmm.
So there were online on YouTube in particular, I could just go down a list, like, Star Wars theory, and, like, everything is like, who are Rey's parents, just anything that wasn't quite answered in The Force Awakens. And then when it turns out she was nobody, as far as what The Last Jedi tells us, people ended up freaking out about it. A lot of people were upset about it. Some people were for it. And I think where I say we shoot ourselves in the foot is that we have this preconceived notion of, like, what this character has to be, not what they might be, but, like, no, this person in my head has to be just like this. And if it doesn't work out, then they didn't do it right. And I do think that's, like, kind of bringing it back to the question about the portrayal of Anakin Skywalker. Like I said, in a story scenario, I buy it. I'm into it. He has to be kicked time and time again in order to finally succumb to this evil temptation. Again, just watching it, there's some annoyance there.
Oh, I want to get your input on this before we move on, because I think we're pretty much there, I think. But what do you say on this?
Hey, I enjoyed it, man. I had no problem with it. Like I said, you can only an actor's performance is one, the screenplay, how well is it written, and then their direction from the director. Does this work? Is this what you want? Yes. Okay, it's going in the film. So the director makes the final call, and I'm for it. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's hard to make certain lines believable, but I mean, it's just that's what he wanted, and I take it.
2 points just to finish this section before we move on. And I know there's probably a ton that can be said, but I don't want to, like, belabor the point, because I think there's room for expanded conversation on this in the next episode because of where he ends up and stuff. But 2 points I want to make is just that I think, for me specifically, Hayden Christensen's performance isn't nearly as bad since I've gone and really delved into the animated Clone Wars series. There's a ton of great Anakin Skywalker in there, like where he's General Skywalker, that makes it's the connective tissue I missed, so that when he does make the turn in episode 3, that it's like, it is really heart-wrenching, and just like it's a huge gut punch. But the other thing I'll say is, just to piggyback off of Austin's point, I think it would be wise for everybody who's, like, hardcore fans of any franchise or any type of media, that let's just, temper expectations. And, it's fun. It's so much fun to fan theorize and everything, but let's let the creators create and not always be so quick to just be butthurt about the tiniest little thing that might not be exactly how we imagined it, because I think that's what opens us up to so many more possibilities going forward, is when we just kind of like dial down the temperature a little bit and kind of like, it's hard to do. It's a very tough exercise for anybody to do. But I think, not being so married to our own expectations is a good practice to have, in general. But this is a question straight to Henry. And the next one is, well, actually, I'm going to combine these two questions because I think it kind of plays together at the same time. First off is, give me your overall opinions of the first Battle of Geonosis. And also, who is your standout Jedi from the Battle of Geonosis? Because we get introduced to a ton here, but what
I think that the Battle of Geonosis is definitely, arguably, in top tier, like one of the best battles in all of Star Wars. They even reference it in Clone Wars multiple times. They reference it in Rebels, where Rex is like, if you think this is crazy, you should have seen the Battle of Geonosis. I don't think that there's another point in Star Wars that we ever see this many Jedi, even in the TV shows, like all the confirmed canons or whatever it is, where we see this many Jedi all going towards it. I know there's rumors about them making a hallway scene in the Rogue One Mandalorian style of Anakin doing like a hallway scene of Order 66 of the Jedi Temple. But until that happens, or if it ever would, this is like, I think somebody said, I can't remember who it was, you just see all these Jedi come out all at once and you're just floored, and just like the progression of it. Like it lasted like 40 minutes or something, where it starts with the
impressive.
I love the way it starts, where they have the three creatures come out to kill Padme, Anakin, and Obi-Wan, and they have to somehow like use what knowledge and skills they have, including Padme, who survives very barely after she got scratched in the back, to surviving that, to the Jedi coming out and helping them, and then finally seeing the clone army come in, which is something was only ever mentioned once, I believe, in the original trilogy when Ben Kenobi's going over it.
You fought in the Clone Wars?
Yeah, and like we had this idea of like, okay, so there was some big stuff that happened, and I remember even watching the movie as a kid, like where he said, "Oh, there hasn't been a war since the first formation of the Republic." So it's like, but going back to A New Hope, they mentioned there was a war.
So wait, did the Jedi know about the clones already, like the army, like before Obi-Wan?
No.
So how did Yoda get all them motherfuckers? Did he like
because he went after Obi-Wan reported
after Obi-Wan went.
He said, I'm going to go look at this clone army while you take whatever, or Mace said he's going to go collect whatever Jedi he can. Because remember, they were spread out really thin in the crawl. They say that because of the rising tensions, because of all these systems potentially going to this separatist alliance, they were trying to dispatch peacekeepers and stuff to really like negotiate and keep them in the fold. And so, yeah, after they find out that Obi-Wan, when Anakin transmits his message from Tatooine to them at the Jedi Temple, he's like, Yoda says, I'm going to go take a look at the clones. You go and take the Jedi and try and figure out how to get Obi-Wan back, and that's how.
So he picked up an order that Mr.
Was it 200,
has placed.
250,000 clones were ready at the time, with 1 million more on the way, or something like that.
And he's like, thank you, see ya.
And I also have to say, in terms of like Jedi as well, like just seeing the relationship between Yoda and Mace Windu, of how like these are the top guys and they have that mutual respect. Like one doesn't command the other. Like they have that mutual like brotherly respect for each other, which is what I love. But I have to say, after watching 1 through 6, not to jump too far ahead, but Yoda also develops a lot through these movies, I think. And that's actually one part of The Last Jedi I actually really, really enjoyed, where he says failure is the greatest teacher, because Yoda fails numerous times, and not just in his fights against Count Dooku and Darth Sidious. He fails to see what Qui-Gon was trying to tell him of, we have to learn to care. We have to learn to connect with people. And Yoda starts doing it little by little. Like, he's like, good relations with the Wookiees I have. Like, where he obviously has this personal connection to them. He starts having a personal connection, like, with the children of the temple. He has a personal connection to even Anakin and Obi-Wan. And you see it more so in episode 3 when Order 66 ultimately happens, when he drops his cane and like he's hurting so much. And that follows him all the way to Return of the Jedi, where you just see him in his bed. It's like, he is not the same character that we see in episode 1. He develops and becomes more humble as a leader, and even going into the afterlife. So I think that Yoda is definitely my favorite Jedi in this specific movie.
Good call. Bo, what about you? Battle of Geonosis in general, and then is there any standout Jedi?
Man, I'm simple, man. Mace Windu, beast. I mean, I wanted to see more of him. I mean, I know I was just being a little spoiled, but everyone needs their time to shine. But it was just so sick to finally see him out just fighting. You're like, what can this guy do? I mean, and then taking out Jango wasn't a big deal. Especially for Mr. Bennett. He's like, Jango's a piece of shit. It's like kicking a rock to the side. But I wish I just would have seen him just take down more challenging stuff. So my next would be just Obi-Wan taking down that freaking grasshopper lobster thing. What was that called? Acklay? The Acklay. He took down the Acklay. He's like, oh, Acklay, yeah, sure. Bam, bam, bam. You're dead. That was like a Legolas moment for me.
Well, it's just funny how it's like the progression of like him having to fight it with a chain and then fight it with like the Geonosian shock spear. And then he finally gets his lightsaber back and he's just like, oh, we're not playing anymore. And just carves it up like a turkey.
Yeah. So that was badass. That was a highlight kill. But as far as the Jedi overall, and just seeing Mason there was just awesome.
I would agree. I mean, like, you get such a big tease in Phantom Menace, and had I been more perceptive as a 9-year-old at the time, I'd been like, we're probably going to see more of them later. But then to actually, like you said, see it, and of course the purple lightsaber for the first time, you've never seen that, and that's pretty amazing. What about you, Austin?
Yeah, this is finally the one time where like I'm not going to be super critical, where I'm just going to like totally fan out, because like it really is just like the culmination of like, this is everything I've been waiting for. And like I really want to know what it's like for an older fan, someone who grew up with the original trilogy, like as they were coming out, to watch this and finally see the Jedi, like however many there were, just in this one area, in this one fight.
Orgasmic.
Like, I hope it was. I really do.
It was like,
it's awesome. It was awesome to see as a 6-year-old who didn't have that backstory growing up.
Yeah.
So, like I said earlier, the entire third act of the movie, basically, like when we're first introduced to, like you said, the 3 creatures that are meant to kill Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme, up until the escape of Count Dooku, I think it's just a roller coaster ride. And I do think, honestly, it's one of the best bits of Star Wars ever put to film. And I'm saying like the entirety of every single movie.
Any Jedi that stand out for you? Like, if you had to pick one?
I'm going to call back to our first talk and say Kit Fisto again, by design alone. He's always been my favorite for design alone.
For sure.
I thought about you when he put him down 3PO. I was like, oh, but he's like, I was like, spit it.
I'm not going to lie. He was definitely one of the probably because he's like more visually like bright and noticeable than a lot of the others. And yeah, no, I love Kit Fisto. I will agree with everybody's points. I mean, the Battle of Geonosis for me is probably one of my favorite scenes of any Star Wars film, and that really is the entire third act. Like I said earlier, it's like when they get taken out and chained up to the pillars all the way until the final fight with I would even go so far as to say when Dooku arrives back on Coruscant, is having his debrief with Darth Sidious. That from start to end, that whole segment is fantastic. And as far as a Jedi, I'll kind of couple something that I missed on previous watches. But since you picked Kit Fisto, I will go with Luminara. I thought her design was really cool, and something that I missed is that her apprentice Barriss Offee plays a huge role in the Clone Wars animated show. She actually frames Ahsoka for a bunch, whatever she was doing, that eventually leads to Ahsoka feeling betrayed and leaving the Jedi Order. and she's in this film like at the very beginning when they're talking the Jedi, they're talking with the the leaders of the Senate with Palpatine and everything. You can see Barriss Offee over there standing on the side, and she also plays a critical role when both Luminara and her come back during the second battle of Geonosis. Barriss and Ahsoka are tasked with going through this like labyrinth of tunnels to go basically find Poggle the Lesser and capture him and shut down everything before he's able to flee, or these little drone Geonosians are able to kind of overrun them, and they end up finding like a Geonosian queen. It's pretty bonkers, that episode. But yeah, no, I like all your guys' points, and again, I love this part of the movie. I mean, it's, as much as I take issue and am critical of the second act, when it's so worth it by the time you get to the third, because regardless of your opinions of a lot of things, I think the culmination really is a great payoff. So I'll again, I'm going to kind of combine these two questions into one, and they're not necessarily related, but just to kind of like give us a nice way to sort of end this and also prime us for the next episode where we'll be talking about Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
Bo, I believe this one goes to you first, and it is what are your thoughts just generally on the Separatist Alliance and kind of like who we see getting involved with that, whether it's the Techno Union, the Bankers Guild, the like all of them. And then are there any characters or anything just in general, and this probably also plays to something earlier, but like, is there anything you would have liked to see explored more, expanded on in this film as we kind of head into the next one?
Well, so the first one you said is about the Separatist Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have much thoughts on that, really. Just aside from just being blinded by what's going on. I mean, it's politics, like it's
very, very muddy.
Yeah, the media controls pretty much your view, and that's what's happening with them. And as far as characters sequences, I would have liked to seen a longer fight on the Camino with Obi-Wan and Django. I really enjoyed that setting for some reason. It just makes things more dramatic. But other than that, man, between those two, I mean, I was pretty happy with it. I mean, obviously we all want more, but you can't get too greedy.
Yeah, it's kind of a long movie to begin with, so
yeah, there's a lot to cover, man, and they cover a lot of stuff there, so it's hard to do it and execute it well. So
I keep people's attention.
Yeah.
What do you think about all those, Austin, the Separatist Alliance, and anything in totality that you would have wanted expanded on?
To correspond with what Bo had said at the time when I first watched this, and it's kind of just been my opinion ever since, the Separatist Alliance bit kind of just was in one ear and out the other for me at the time. So like I never really understood what was going on, or like what it meant for like, the future installments, or, in the future of the Star Wars universe. The only opinion I really have is that I think it's kind of there to be an Easter egg, especially when we get the scene with the hologram of the Death Star plans. I'm kind of like, oh, that's a nice callback to the original trilogy. But other than that, I really don't have much of an opinion at all. And what was part 2 of this question? I'm sorry.
Just if you would, if there's anything that you can think of that you would have wanted expanded on, or like maybe explained a bit more, or delved into deeply, kind of that goes into the next movie to kind of, I don't want to say connect them better, because, it is a pretty good standalone movie in its own right.
Yeah, I was going to say, give me a reason to understand why Django and Boba are actually badasses for some reason. But
I love it.
I think what the movie did, or what it was trying to portray as far as the story it told, I think it hit all the plot points it needed. I don't know. Nothing about this movie really feels rushed or unnecessary. I mean, I think that the relationship between Anakin and Padme is forced, in my opinion, but I don't necessarily think watching it is necessarily rushed, or like, how did we get here so quickly? or like I feel like something's left out here and there. I feel like we needed a little more time with Anakin just executing the Sand People. I feel like that scene has always just felt like it's over a little too quickly.
It is. It's kind of the Quidditch World Cup of that, isn't it? Where it's just like, and it's done.
Yeah, it's like we got a taste. I feel like if there was like an extended cut release, like there's probably more of just Anakin hacking away at Sand People. And I'm not saying I want to see like people just getting chopped in half more. I just feel like we really.
Is this what you want, Mr. Bennett? Blood, pieces here, fucking.
I think we really just need more inner turmoil in Anakin Skywalker, and I think that like teased us with a little bit, and then that's all we got.
There actually is a reason for that, and I only know this because I'm kind of a nerd and when it comes to cinema sometimes. At the turn of the decade at the time, because this movie came out in 2002, there were new regulations that determined what would be a PG movie and a PG-13 movie. So, for example, in A New Hope, when you see Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, like the skeletons on fire, or like the bloody arm, I almost said the fish head cantina, the Moss Isley cantina. Those
We're from Maryland, everybody, by the way.
Yeah. But also, like, if you go back to a movie like Superman from the 80s, where they show like the boy when he climbs out, like he's completely butt naked, you see his penis and everything. That was still okay to be deemed a PG movie, but then at the turn of the decade, they had new requirements of what would be a PG and a PG-13 movie. And then when Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005, that was the first PG-13 Star Wars movie we ever got. Ever since then, we've had nothing but PG-13 movies. So I think, like, where I completely agree that we should have had more of that scene, I would have loved to see it. I think at the time, like, it was still the idea of, like, okay, these are still going to be directed towards kids. The only thing that was like when you get to Revenge of the Sith, it's like, well, you have to show how the deepest, darkest character in all the galaxy becomes that way. They had no other choice. It's like, we have to go PG-13 and really show like the epic, dark downfall of the galaxy and of Anakin Skywalker. But
I'm literally getting like burned.
Yeah.
Henry, any final thoughts as far as the Separatists and what you would have liked to see other than maybe a little more Sand People carnage?
For the simple answer for what I would like to see, I think there should have been more dual saber. I think that's awesome.
I can get behind that.
Yeah, like that part of the trailer is what sold me on it. I was just like, where's the one lightsaber fight? Like, where's it at? And then
you saw the 1 second out of the 14 seconds, all right?
Yeah, and like he goes at it, and I'm just like, yeah, why couldn't we get more than that? As far as the Separatists, I always took it, and I might be completely missing the point on this, but this is always how I've kind of justified it in my head, is that Sidious basically tells him, hey, go do this thing on Naboo. Why? Because I'm powerful and you're going to go do it. And it's like, okay, so they do it, and then and they know he had powerful impact in the Senate, and then when they get in trouble after they lose the Battle of Naboo, he's like, well, I'm not going to help you guys anymore. So then Christopher Lee or Count Dooku touches on it, is like he came to him for help and told him everything. It was like, well, basically we hate the Senate now because we're in a lot of trouble and we basically want to get back with them. So I honestly think they were just manipulated the entire time and never really mattered. I will say that it was like when Anakin walks in to kill the Viceroy, I mean, we'll touch on that in the next episode, but it's like when that went down, it was just like, yeah, he's killing the guy who's tried to kill his wife. Mm-hmm. And like, I think that was something that they could have expanded on even in that movie, is Anakin fully knowing this is the guy that's trying to kill my wife for years. And it's like, now I'm going to take him out, just further adding to his downfall into the dark side. But I absolutely love the battle droids. I know a lot of people think they're silly, but like, I think they're comical, but I think they're also cool.
Battle droids?
Yeah, I love battle droids.
Are those standard ones, or the ones that
the super battle droids and stuff?
The big bulky, are they the big bulky ones, or the rollers with generated shields?
Those are droidicas.
Oh, they don't know much for droidicas. That's what I always. That's what that. Okay, yeah.
I love the droidicas. The battle droids are cool.
Yeah. Well, they're easy to chop up. Do you guys? Sorry, this is really off topic. Do you guys think we'll ever get like a rated R like Jedi lightsaber just movie.
I have a hard time thinking we will. I would love one. I would be here for one, but I think in the Disney sphere, unless they start exploring with like putting maybe Star Wars content on like FX or somewhere where they, one of these subsidiaries they own that does put more mature content on. But it's part of the Star Wars umbrella, which means they want it as marketable as possible and as like widely appealing and stuff. I would love one, but I have a hard time believing they think that's a good business decision.
Yeah, I would say not while Disney. Yeah, not while Disney is the one producing the movies.
Like even for like a Sith, like I would love to see. Like I'm playing Mortal Kombat. I was like, how badass would it be if Darth Maul was a Mortal Kombat character? That shit, he would be.
Wait, didn't you have Vader and Yoda in that one fighter game?
Soul Calibur.
Oh, Soul Calibur.
Soul Calibur 4. Yeah.
You ever played Jedi Power Battles?
No.
Oh my god, that game is cool.
Well, guys, any final thoughts before we wrap up or anything? Or?
That's what I was about to ask if we wanted to do a repeat of our last talk and just say like have a minute to just like gush and love the movie, if you want.
Yeah. What you want to start us off, Henry? You're clearly the the senator from the prequels. Propose.
Watch your career with great interest.
Much for droidekas.
I mean, this is just one of the three movies that just like helped define my childhood. Like these three movies, I think. I mean, I'm always going to be a defender of these movies, regardless of like what. And I mean, of course, they're flawed like any movie. I've always just absolutely loved the world building that these three films have done. I think in terms of expansive universe, like we've never seen a galaxy bigger than in these three movies specifically. But also, I think out of the core 9, we haven't seen, I did the math the other day of how many actual worlds you see in each movie. I think in this movie in particular, you see the most, because usually you go to 3 planets at most. This movie takes you to 4, between Coruscant, Geonosis, Tatooine, Naboo. Oh, Camino, so it's 5 planets.
Camino.
And then also, I think Rogue One might be tied then, because they were on the planet where Jin was living with Galen at the very beginning. And then they went to the like almost like nowhere kind of station that was on the asteroid. And then they go to Jeddah and Edu and Scarif. And Yavin 4. Oh, so that's 6. So yeah, maybe they would beat. But even then, though, it's like at the time where you just see like not only all the different worlds, the different landscapes, but also the very diverse range of creatures. And I think that's also something that I can't ever think, like the imagination of it. At the time, like I know that some of you share my love for Pokemon and like Digimon and like these, you see all these cool characters, and this movie like did that, like especially with the Battle of Geonosis, we have the 3 creatures coming out to execute everyone. But even on the plot points alone, like, lightsaber fights and, the starships and the seismic charge out in the asteroid field, these are all great things. But it's like, for me, it's always come down to, do you care about the characters or not? Like, are you actually on this journey with them to see where they're going? And for me, especially with these 3, the movies, like, it's always 100% yes. And the 2 characters that like I'll always ride for in these movies is Obi-Wan and Anakin, because they have very diverse paths, but just knowing the significance and the historical significance of what they mean in the original trilogy, all this build up leading all the way up to the fight in A New Hope, when we see the first lightsaber battle that ever happened, even though it's not the most fantastic thing. Mm-hmm. It's because of all the events of these movies, and specifically this one, when the Clone Wars finally begin and they really start being tested side by side. So I absolutely adore this movie now as well. And I'll piggyback off of that a little bit. The creature designs are incredible in this. That the new ones we got. I'm just even something as brief and as kind of tertiary as the like giant pterodactyl that like pops out of the ocean on Camino that the Kaminoans are riding on from platform to platform. I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I mean, I just go back to, this is a while I might not have agreed with the execution in several places, and it didn't quite land as well as I would have liked for me personally, I think this part of the story is so incredibly essential and pivotal. And I have the great fortune of remembering what it was like post this movie, but not having episode 3 yet, and just the tabletop conversations with family and friends and just all over the place. Like, what's going to happen? What, we kind of knew what was happening in this, but it's just, like what's going to happen in episode 3 after all the stuff we got in this. And it was really fun time to be a part of the fandom. It's kind of similar to like post Infinity War before Endgame, where you're just like, how are they going to change what happened? Like, it's kind of like, we lived that Clone Wars period that we had heard of, and we just, it was a good time, and I really enjoyed a lot of this movie. So what about you, Bo?
I enjoyed it. Like I said, it's just another chapter. I feel like there were a lot of similar nods to Empire, I guess, in a way, how it overall went. Like even the move that Obi-Wan used to evade Jango, sticking on the asteroid, just chilling. The Millennium Falcon did that on the Star Destroyer, just
it's true,
flew by and stuff. So
never even realized that.
Yeah, so it was like a little nod. I was like, okay, I see what you did there. And then at the end, just how losing someone's limb's gonna be gone, and just ends with them just we lost this.
Not even like foreshadowing, but a direct sort of thematic correlation to how, like, Obi-Wan evades the the torpedo that they send after him by ejecting his fuel canisters and stuff. And then in Empire, they kind of sneak away from the Imperial fleet by sneaking out with the trash being released, and Boba being the only bounty hunter who had the wherewithal to be like, he didn't just disappear. He would have gone to hyperspace or hyperspeed if he could have.
But and he was in the trash.
Crap. Do you think that's because he saw Obi-Wan Kenobi do that on Geonosis? Even though at the time he thinks he's dead, but maybe he pieced it together and was like, wait a minute, I've seen this maneuver before.
Like, how's he still alive?
I mean, he's existed in that seedy underbelly of the galaxy for so long. I think he knows a lot of the tricks of the trade. But Austin, why don't you finish us off with your thoughts before I wrap us up?
Sure. Like I said earlier, I know I've been super critical all night, but at the end of the day, especially with the prequel trilogy and the OG trilogy, I have the utmost amount of love and passion for this entire franchise, minus Last Jedi and Return or Rise of Skywalker. But I'll forever associate this movie in particular as my first Star Wars movie, my first dive into this universe. I have nothing but like positive memories to associate it with me. I know my love for it still exists. It always will. I know I look at it more critically than I ever have in my life at this point. But it doesn't go without saying that it's just like, I will watch the prequels. I will watch the original trilogy just any day of my life. Nothing will ever change that. I love Star Wars. I love Attack of the Clones. I love other movies more. But, again, the Battle of Geonosis, like you said, I think it was you, Spencer, where it just makes up for like the entirety of like what you had to go through to get there. It's just, and again, like around that time, we started getting Battlefront games. It's just like, that was a great time to be a Star Wars fan.
Oh yeah.
And I'm glad that I was young and I've been able to enjoy it for my entire life.
It really is too bad that the Bounty Hunter game came out after this, because if we had that sort of intel going in, it would have made it, and it still does make Jango a much more fleshed out, interesting character. But thank you guys so much for joining us, Bo, Austin, Henry. I mean, I love the fact that we all have different opinions. I think that's what probably makes these conversations great, is that it's not all like, if all movies were just perfect to all of us, it would be a very boring conversation. It would just be like, oh, they're so great, everything's fantastic. I like that we have different opinions, and I think we set hopefully a good example for everybody having these discussions, that you can like things, you can not like things. I want to hear all the conversation, but it's nice to have it in a respectful way, that I think helps us communicate better, just in general in life and everything. But thank you all so much for joining us. Please, if you haven't already, like us on Facebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It means the world to us and everything. And we will get back to you as soon as possible on what our episode lineup looks like next week. My guess is that we will try and do Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and hopefully we can get to Revenge of the Sith. I will get back to you on that. But anyways, thanks guys so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you, guys. Love you long time.
May the
Goodbye,
Force-
everyone.
May the force be with you.
Oh, you had to.
Always.
You dirty dog.